The mansion looked nothing like the places Thalen Crestfall had grown up in. Its tall iron gates stood like soldiers, blocking him out, while the white stone walls gleamed in the afternoon sun. Everything about this house screamed money, power, and the kind of life he had only seen in magazines while sitting on a worn couch in a group home. Thalen's heart pounded as he stood outside, clutching the papers that proved who he was. For 40 years, he had wondered about his parents, why they gave him away, if they ever thought about him, if they would want him back. The search had taken years, and he had almost given up hope. But when Darius Thornwell, his lawyer and closest friend, had called last week and said, "We found them," Thalen had known this moment was coming. He wiped his palms on his jeans and took a deep breath. The gate buzzed when Darius pressed the intercom, and a housekeeper's voice came through, asking who they were. Thalen's throat went dry. "This is Thalen Crestfall," Darius said smoothly. "We're here to see Isolde Vera and Corvin Maurik." There was a pause on the other end, then a hesitant, one moment. The gate swung open with a slow creak, and Thalen's stomach turned as they walked up the driveway. The mansion loomed closer with every step. It was beautiful, but it also felt cold, distant, as if it didn't want him there. When they reached the front door, Darius gave him a reassuring nod. "You ready?" Thalen nodded, though his chest felt tight. He knocked. It took nearly a full minute before the door opened. A woman in her late 60s stood there, her posture perfect, her expression guarded. Her silver hair was swept back neatly, her dress simple but expensive. She looked at Thalen like she was trying to place him. "Yes." Thalen's voice shook slightly. "My name is Thalen. Thalen Crestfall. I think," he swallowed hard. "I think you're my mother." For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a cold, practiced look. "You must be mistaken," she said. "We already have a son." The words hit Thalen like a physical blow. "No," he said softly, pulling out the birth records he had carried all this way. "I'm your firstborn. You gave me up 40 years ago." Isolde's lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't talk about that," she said flatly. "And you don't exist. You were never supposed to come here." Behind her, a man appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, with streaks of gray in his dark hair. His presence filled the doorway. Corvin Maurik. Thalen had seen his picture online when he learned who his father was. The powerful hotel magnate whose face graced magazines, smiling at charity galas and business conferences. "What's going on?" Corvin demanded, his sharp eyes landing on Thalen. "He's no one," Isolde said quickly. "He's leaving." Corvin stepped forward. "You have 5 seconds to get off my property before I call security." Thalen's hands shook, but he stood his ground. For years, he had imagined this moment, imagined being welcomed, maybe even embraced. But instead, he was being erased a second time. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," Thalen said, his voice trembling. "I just wanted to know why. Why you gave me away. Why you never came for me." Corvin's face hardened. "Because you were a mistake," he said bluntly. "And we don't owe you anything. Leave." The words sliced through Thalen's chest. A lifetime of waiting, hoping, and hurting, all crashing down in that one moment. He felt his throat tighten as he turned toward the driveway. But before he could take another step, he heard a car door close behind him. "Actually," said a calm, steady voice, "you might want to hear what we have to say before you ask us to leave." Darius Thornwell walked up the steps, his expression cool but firm. He held a thick folder under his arm and glanced at Thalen, then back at the couple. "I have documents here that prove Thalen's identity, and a few other things you're going to want to see," Darius said, his voice smooth as glass. Isolde's face paled and Corvin's jaw tightened. "This isn't over," Darius added, stepping past Thalen and placing the folder on a small table in the entryway. "You can either hear us out now, or we can take this to court. Your choice." The air seemed to thicken. For the first time, Corvin didn't look so sure of himself. Isolde's hand gripped the edge of the doorframe, her knuckles white. Thalen stayed quiet, heart still pounding, but something inside him shifted. For the first time in 40 years, he wasn't just the unwanted child. He had the truth on his side, and he wasn't going to walk away this time. The silence at the front door was heavy, like the air before a storm. Thalen Crestfall stood frozen, staring at the woman who had just denied him and the man who had called him a mistake. His whole body shook, but he didn't move. It was Darius Thornwell who broke the silence, his calm voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "You can throw insults all day," Darius said evenly, setting the thick folder down on a polished side table in the entryway. "But the facts don't go away. And the facts say that Thalen is your son. Your firstborn. Isolde Vera's face tightened. You think a few papers will change anything? She asked coldly, though her voice cracked at the edges. Darius opened the folder slowly, pulling out the first document. Birth certificate, he said, handing it toward Corvin Maurik. Signed in your handwriting, Mr. Maurik. The name of the hospital. The date. The signature of the attending doctor. It all matches. Corvin didn't take it. His jaw clenched as he glared at the paper, his eyes narrowing like daggers. Darius pulled out another sheet. Hospital records, he continued. Medical files that were sealed but never erased. They list Thalen as your son. It's all there. Thalen watched his father's face carefully. For a moment, he thought he saw fear. But then Corvin stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Corvin growled. Do you think I'll let a man like you drag dirt on my family? This empire, he gestured toward the massive home around them, was built on reputation. And I won't let a ghost from the past take that away. Darius didn't flinch. Instead, he slid another paper from the folder, this one thicker, with a red stamp on the corner. Funny you should mention reputation, Darius said coolly. Because what we found isn't just about abandonment. It's about fraud. It's about how you erased your own child from the records so your investors would never find out about the scandal that could have sunk your empire before it started. Isolde gasped and grabbed Corvin's arm. Corvin, stop, she whispered, but he shook her hand off. What scandal? Thalen asked, his voice breaking. He had been quiet until now, but hearing that word sent a shiver down his spine. Darius looked at him for a moment, then turned back to Corvin. Should I tell him? He asked softly. Or do you want to? Corvin's lips curled into a sneer, but he said nothing. Darius sighed and faced Thalen. 40 years ago, your father was already married. But not to Isolde. The words hit Thalen like thunder. What? You were born during an affair, Darius continued gently. When your existence threatened to ruin Corvin's marriage and his chance at building this empire, he chose the easy way out. He paid to have you placed into foster care, erased every trace he could, and made sure no one would ever connect you to him. Isolde stayed with him anyway, but they agreed to keep you a secret forever. Thalen's vision blurred. His knees felt weak. All these years, he had imagined he was unwanted because of poverty or desperation, or even illness. But this? He was thrown away because of greed and shame. Is it true? Thalen whispered, looking straight at Isolde. Her eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't answer. Instead, she turned her face away. That silence told him everything he needed to know. Corvin slammed his fist against the doorframe, making everyone jump. Enough of this, he shouted. This is blackmail. You think you can scare us with old papers? I have more lawyers than you could ever afford. If you go public, I'll destroy you both. But Darius only smiled faintly, calm as ever. Already thought of that. These documents are secured with my firm. If anything happens to me, they're automatically released to the press. I'm sure your investors and shareholders would love to read about how the great Corvin Maurik built his empire on lies. The threat landed like a bomb. For the first time, Corvin's confident mask cracked. His nostrils flared, his fists clenched, but he didn't speak. Isolde finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft, trembling. Corvin, maybe it's time. We can't hide forever. Her husband shot her a glare sharp enough to cut glass, but she looked away, tears slipping down her cheeks. Thalen stared at them both, his own chest heavy with grief and anger. His entire life had been shaped by their choices. Every cold night in foster care, every time he had felt unwanted, every scar he carried inside him. It had all been because they cared more about their reputation than their child. And now, standing here, he finally saw the truth. He wasn't the weak one. He wasn't the mistake. He was the secret they could never bury. Darius placed the last paper back into the folder and shut it firmly. You have a choice, he said quietly. Face this with dignity, or watch everything collapse around you. But either way, Thalen's name will not be erased again. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Isolde pressed a hand to her mouth, her body trembling. Corvin turned away, pacing like a trapped animal, his silence louder than his anger. And Thalen just stood there, staring at the people who gave him life but denied him love. For the first time in 40 years, he wasn't the boy waiting for answers. He was the man holding them accountable. The living room of the mansion was silent except for the ticking of a golden clock on the wall. Thalen Crestfall sat on the edge of a leather chair, his hands clenched together. Across from him, Isolde Vera looked pale and shaken, her eyes darting between him and Darius Thornwell. Corvin Malric stood near the fireplace, his shoulders stiff, his jaw locked like stone. Darius had laid the folder open on the coffee table. The papers sat there like a bomb, waiting to go off again. Corvin finally spoke, his voice cold. "This is nothing but noise. You think some yellowed papers and hospital files mean anything in my world? I can make this disappear. Just like I made him disappear 40 years ago." The words cut through Thalen like a blade. He leaned forward, his voice trembling but strong. "You think I don't know what that meant for me? Do you know how many nights I wondered why? Do you know how it feels to be passed around like trash, to never belong anywhere? I wanted a family, Corvin. I wanted you to care. But you only cared about your name." Corvin's eyes narrowed. "My name is everything." "No," Thalen said, shaking his head, his voice growing firmer. "Your name is nothing without the truth. And now the truth is here." For a long moment, no one moved. The weight of his words filled the room. Isolde broke first. She let out a shaky sob and covered her face with her hands. "We thought it was the only way," she whispered. "Corvin was building the company. The investors, the press, if they had found out, it would have destroyed us before we even began. I told myself you'd be better off, that someone else would love you, but I knew it was a lie." Her shoulders shook as she cried, the sound sharp in the still room. Thalen looked at her, a mix of anger and pity twisting inside him. "I didn't need wealth. I didn't need mansions. I just needed my mother to choose me. But you chose silence." Isolde's sobs deepened, but Corvin didn't move. He stayed by the fireplace, his back straight, his face carved in pride. Darius leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Mr. Malric, this isn't about what you can erase anymore. The documents are filed. The truth is ready to be seen. All that's left is how you respond. You can keep fighting and watch the empire crumble, or you can admit what you did and show the world you're at least capable of facing the truth." Corvin's fists tightened, his knuckles white. "If you think I'll kneel, you don't know me." "No one's asking you to kneel," Darius replied coolly. "Just to stop pretending." Corvin turned sharply, his glare landing on Thalen. "What do you want? Money? A piece of my company? Is that it? Because I'll tell you right now, you won't get a cent." Thalen rose from his seat, his hands trembling, but his voice steady. "I don't want your money. I don't want your empire. I just want acknowledgement. I want the world to know I exist. That I was your son, even if you didn't love me." That demand shook the room in a way money never could. Isolde lifted her tear-streaked face, her lips trembling. Corvin's expression faltered, just for a second, but he quickly hardened it again. "You think you can shame me?" he spat. "You think anyone will believe you over me?" "They'll believe the proof," Darius said firmly. "And if they don't, they'll believe the scandal. You can't bury this anymore. The only choice you have is whether you walk into the storm or get dragged into it." The ticking clock grew louder in Thalen's ears. He felt his breath catching, but he forced himself to stand taller. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the abandoned child begging for scraps of love. He was the one holding power. Corvin's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, his face tightening further. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Board Chairman. Darius leaned over and glanced at it too, a small smirk tugging at the edge of his mouth. "They already know something's wrong, don't they?" Darius said softly. "Secrets don't stay buried forever, Mr. Malric." Corvin's hand hovered over the phone, then slowly lowered. He didn't answer. Isolde whispered, her voice barely audible. "Corvin, please. We can't fight this anymore. Not with him here. Not with the proof sitting on the table." Corvin closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling with slow, furious breaths. For a man who had built his entire life on control, this moment was his prison. Thalen stared at him, waiting, his heart heavy. He had dreamed of this day for so long, but never imagined it would feel like this. Not triumphant, but raw, painful, and unfinished. Darius sat back, his arms folded. "It's simple," he said. "Acknowledge him. Admit the truth. Or watch everything collapse. Either way, Thalen will not disappear again." The golden clock ticked. The silence pressed down. And slowly, cracks began to spread through the world Corvin had spent decades building. The golden clock ticked louder, like it was marking the end of an era. The silence inside the mansion was so thick it felt heavy in the air. Thalen Crestfall stood tall, his chest tight, his hands clenched, waiting for the words he had been denied his whole life. Isolde Vera's face was streaked with tears. She reached for Corvin Malric's arm, her voice shaking. "We can't keep lying. He's here. He's our son." Corvin pulled his arm away. His jaw was like iron, his pride still burning. He is nothing, Corvin said coldly. He was nothing 40 years ago, and he is nothing now. The words cut through Thalen like knives. But this time, instead of breaking him, they fueled something stronger inside. His voice rose, trembling but clear. I'm nothing? Look at me. I survived everything you threw me into. I lived through nights you couldn't imagine, with no name, no family, no love. And yet here I stand, not because of you, but in spite of you. Isolde broke again, her sobs filling the room. Corvin, though, stood still, his face locked in stone. Darius Thornwell leaned forward, his tone sharp but calm. You can deny him all you want, but the world won't. The board is already suspicious. If this goes public, your empire falls apart. This is your last chance to control the story before it controls you. Corvin's phone buzzed again on the table. This time, the caller ID showed board chairman urgent. He let it buzz, his hand twitching as if the sound itself mocked him. Thalen stepped forward, his voice steady. I don't want your money. I don't want your empire. I don't even want your love anymore. I just want acknowledgement. Admit that I exist. Admit that I am your son. The room froze. Corvin's pride cracked. His face twisted, his eyes burning with rage. But his silence told the truth. He knew he was trapped. Isolde, trembling, finally whispered the words. You are our son, Thalen. We abandoned you, and it was wrong. She covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. I am sorry. The words were soft, broken, but they were real. Corvin turned, his voice low with fury. Isolde. But Darius cut him off. It's over, Corvin. If you don't admit it now, you'll be forced to. Do it here. Do it now. Corvin stared at Thalen, his eyes like fire. Finally, after a long, tense silence, he spoke. His voice was hard, but the words carried weight. Yes, he said bitterly. You are my son. My mistake. My secret. The words were sharp, but they were an admission all the same. Thalen's chest rose and fell, his eyes stinging. It wasn't the warm recognition he had dreamed of as a boy, but it was truth. And that was enough. Darius nodded, closing the folder. Then it's settled. The acknowledgement will be made public. You don't have to like it, but you can't change it anymore. Corvin turned away, his pride shattered, his empire now hanging by a thread. Isolde collapsed into a chair, her sobs echoing through the grand room. Thalen stood quietly, watching them. For a lifetime, he had wanted their love, their arms open, their words soft. But what he got instead was something different, something more powerful. The truth. The end of their silence. And strangely, it felt like enough. He turned to Darius. Let's go. As they walked to the door, Isolde called after him, her voice broken. Thalen, please don't hate me. He stopped for a moment, his back still turned. His voice was quiet, steady. I don't hate you, but I will never forget. And with that, he walked out of the mansion, the heavy door closing behind him. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. The sun was sinking, painting the sky with gold and crimson. Thalen breathed deeply, his chest rising as if for the first time in years. Darius placed a hand on his shoulder. How do you feel? Thalen let out a shaky laugh, half a sob. Free. For the first time in my life. I feel free. They walked down the long driveway, past the iron gates, leaving behind the mansion that had once been his greatest dream and his greatest wound. He didn't have their money. He didn't have their love. But he had the truth. And that truth was something they could never erase.